Hey guys, welcome to this perception revision video on Gregory's constructive theory of perception. We're going to quickly run through what you need to know to be able to outline Gregory's theory for the GCSE exam and some simple evaluations you can use to get you through the exam. So let's get stuck in. Basically, Gregory's constructive theory of perception is the opposite of Gibson's. That's one way to think about it, but it often does result in students mixing them up together quite a lot. So you've got to think about really clearly now the differences and the opposites to what was in the last video. So when talking about perception, Gregory talks about perception as a top-down process. Okay, so this time we're talking top-down. One way that I like to think about this is that it means that the information starts in the brain and works its way down into the environment, where we then, we're making the perception starting at the top and then working our way down because it's already in the brain. Basically, that's because Gregory says that to make perceptions, we're using information that we already have. So that's our past experiences, our knowledge that's in our brain. We're going to use that information to make a perception. And then we're going to use the context of the event or the environment to help us understand what's going on around us. So basically what that means is perception is a constructive process. So construct basically means to build. So essentially we're going to build a perception from the knowledge that we have. So that's our past experiences, our knowledge, our upbringing, and we're going to combine that with the sensations in the environment to make a combination and a construction of a perception in order to understand what is happening. So basically what he's essentially saying is that perception is a learned process, not innate. So that's the opposite of Gibson. And that when we make a perception, we are essentially making an inference. Now, an inference is his word for a best guess about what we're perceiving. And that best guess is typically correct because from our past experiences, we know what's typically going to happen. We know what we're typically going to perceive, but there are rare occasions where it might be wrong. So, for example, you might be sat at home, you might perceive, let's say the sensation comes in from outside of a familiar sounding car, and you go, oh, that sounds like my parents' car. So you make a perception that sounds like their exhaust and their engine. So you stand up to look outside. Most of the time, because that's what you've been exposed to and because that's what you've experienced and that's what you've learnt, you'd look outside and you'd see your parents' car. But there's always going to be that one time out of 100 where the neighbour has a friend arrive who has the same car as your mum and dad, and therefore it was not the correct inference. But basically, Gregory says that most of the time you would make these inferences based on past experiences. You would be correct probably 99 times out of 100. Okay, so in terms of if you had the question to describe and evaluate Gregory's constructive theory of perception, again, if you're struggling to get your head around it, here is the describe part of that exam answer. Again, like the last video, I'm not going to read it to you. You can pause it here and you can have a read through if you want to. Okay, so if you're going to evaluate Gregory's theory, we now need to start thinking about why he might be correct and what evidence is out there to maybe challenge him. So if we start thinking about, again, the opposite to the last video, the opposite to Gibson, if we think about what babies showed us, babies show us that they can make perceptions from the second that they're born. That shows that some elements of perception are innate. Gregory says that perception is learned and is based on past experiences. Well, babies are challenging Gregory here. Babies are showing us that some perception is innate, so Gregory is wrong. And Gibson was right about that part of it. So first challenge for Gregory, babies. However, on the positive, illusions very much show that Gregory might well be right. They support Gregory's ideas. So if you look at the illusions on the right hand side, you've got the kinesia triangle. This shows us that sensation and perception are separate things. But you've also got the B13, which very much shows us that what our perceptions are often based on our past experiences. So that comes from sort of evidence from research that will be in the next video. But there's the B13 study, and there's a very short recap. The participants were shown either letters or numbers, so they were being exposed to and perceiving something quite specific, and then they were shown this B13 illusion here. And whatever they had recently been experiencing influenced what they perceived. So if they saw letters, they thought it was a B. If they saw numbers, they thought this was a 13. So this shows that past experiences do affect what we perceive, and that supports Gregory. So Gregory, challenged by babies, they show that it's innate, perception is innate, but supported by lots of illusions and lots of evidence, which shows that we do learn perception, and that perception is affected by our past experiences and our recent experiences. Right guys, that's hopefully a quick summary of the Gregory's theory of perception. It's the opposite of Gibson. You've got to know the difference. They're very common theories in the perception section. Students typically mix them up together, and that really affects the marks really in the long run. So see if we can get them separated, understand the difference, and know how they are opposite of each other.